COP28 President Sultan Al Jaber of the UAE describes a climate deal approved by almost 200 countries on Wednesday as a quote-unquote historic package of measures. The next report tells you more.
After 2 weeks of hard-fought negotiations, the COP28 Climate Summit approved a deal that would, for the first time, push nations to transition away from fossil fuels to avert the worst effects of climate change on Wednesday. Representatives from nearly 200 countries agreed to begin reducing global consumption of fossil fuels to avert the worst impacts of climate change at the summit.
Through the nights and the early hours of the morning, we worked collectively for consensus. The presidency listened, engaged, and guided. I promised I would roll up my sleeves, and I promised I would be with you every step of the way.
COP28 President Sultan Al Jaber called the deal historic.
It is so decided. Enhanced, balanced, but make no mistake, historic package to accelerate climate action. It is the UAE consensus. An agreement is only as good as its implementation. We are what we do, not what we say. We must take the steps necessary to turn this agreement into tangible actions.
5 key measures that have been outlined to combat climate change in the deal. They are a just transition away from fossil fuels by 2050, prioritizing zero and low emission technologies like renewables and nuclear, phasing out inefficient fossil fuel subsidies, accelerating the phase down of coal power, and rapidly deploying clean transportation solutions. Saudi Arabia welcomed the deal, but repeated the oil producers' stance that tackling climate change was about reducing emission using all technologies.
On behalf of the Arab group, I also extend to you thanks and appreciation for your efforts, along with all party states, towards the success of the results of the first global stocktake and the success of its outcomes, which confirm the multiple paths and approaches that achieve the goal of limiting the temperature 1.5 degrees in line with the circumstances and priorities of each country in order to achieve the goals of sustainable development.
These measures aim to align with the temperature goals of the Paris Agreement and urgently address the need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuels and coal to mitigate climate change. These actions aim to significantly reduce emissions across energy systems and transportation, paving the way for a sustainable future. The proposal underscores the critical role of multilateralism and international cooperation in addressing global challenges, particularly in the context of the Paris Agreement's implementation. Anil Thomas's report for DD India.
And my colleague Vinod Kumar joins us from Dubai. Vinod, how are the words transitioning away different from a phase out of fossil fuels? Did it all come down to semantics at the end?
Ramachandran, yes, semantics do play a definite role here. In the first draft, the mention was on reduction and consumption of fossil fuels. The world expected that there will be a phase down, but in the final draft and the approved document, it says transitioning. Now, if you want to explain the semantics of this, we need to know first why in the first place that we are using fossil fuels. Fossil fuels were being used historically because of its abundance, cheap price, and most importantly, in the current time, it is the energy calorific density. Even the renewable sources, the batteries, the hydrogen does not have the enough calorific density that a fossil fuel has. That's the main challenge in transitioning to a renewable energy source for the future. So if you say phase out, you just remove fossil fuels from the entire planet. Then what is going to replace it? So that is where the word transition is very important. Transitioning means slowly transitioning from the current fossil fuels to a more equitable more dependable and more accessible forms of renewable energy. That is the word transition means here. And COP28 presidency not only have mentioned this transition thing, there are a slew of other things. You have to see the complete document to get the complete package. There is emphasis on the national determined contributions. There is also emphasis on tripling the renewable energies and doubling energy efficiency. That's how this word transition comes. Doubling the energy efficiency of the existing systems, tripling renewables, and COP28 presidency's action agenda. Action agenda is a four-pronged mechanism: fast-tracking just energy transition, fixing the climate finance, and focusing on people culture. This COP had an indigenous people day, a day dedicated for the youth. So this is an all-inclusive process that had happened here. And of course, the last one among these four is fostering inclusivity in climate action. This is the area where India has given its complete focus: inclusivity, common but differentiated responsibilities, and climate justice and climate equity. This is where the semantics transitions itself into the concrete plans that the COP28 presidency as well as the COP UNFCCC has tasked with.
Right, Vinod, now that we've got semantics out of the way, how would you sum up India's interventions at COP28? Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the opening plenary. He took part in two side events that India co-chaired with the UAE and Sweden. Do you think there's enough in the text of the agreement that should make New Delhi satisfied, if not happy?
I would say that New Delhi is really happy. This COP28 or any COP for that matter is a consensus-based mechanism. All the 198 countries has to come into a consensus so that we can go about the future. So India, of course, is definitely a party. In fact, India is one among the big three. India, United States, and China are the major stakeholders in this climate action. And India's presence there was really emphatic. India achieved the reduction in the emission intensity and surpassing the 2030 targets ahead of the schedule. This was clearly given in our national statement, and our climate action was further demonstrated by achieving 40% of electric installed capacity through non-fossil fuel sources. And India's international endeavors like the Global Biofuel Alliance, the Solar Alliance, Mission Life, CDRI, these are the things that gave India its own place in the COP28. On top of that, our Prime Minister had launched a program called the Green Credit Initiative along with the various stakeholders, and we also had India, Sweden lead IT industry transition in heavy industries like steel, aluminium, the lead IT event, and the Environment Ministry has also launched its own events called the Mission Life, Lifestyle for Environment, and the Green Rising Initiative along with the UNICEF. So India's total action here at COP was jam-packed, and India really focused on climate equity, climate justice, and emphasis on CBDR principles. And more than that, the Green Credit Initiative, this is a pragmatic and philosophical shift that our country has launched. The alternative that exists right now is carbon credit mechanism, but carbon credit mechanism have completely gone in a commercial way, and there is no way, not a very tangible way to track it whether this is having a real impact. So that's why our country, with its concept of Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam, came with this Green Credit Initiative focused on 8 different sectors like water conservation, mangrove conservation, and energy efficiency in agriculture. 8 heads. These are being floated by our Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, and we will be having a green credit portal also so that the world can learn from us. This is India's contribution in COP28.
All right. Thank you for that elaborate intervention there. My colleague Vinod Kumar reporting there from Dubai in the UAE. Thank you for now. Appreciate it. Right, now let me get you some more news on DD India News Hour. A security breach briefly disrupted proceedings in India's parliament after a man jumped from an overhead visitors gallery into the lower house of the legislature and set off a smoke canister. The disruption took place on the anniversary of the 2001 attack on the country's parliament.